Hello and welcome everyone to this fifth episode of our video series, Delivering Self-Service Private Cloud. I'm again joined today by my colleague, Pramod. Welcome back, Pramod.
Hey, Satya, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, man. It's good to be back, right? It's our fifth episode.
Yeah.
Excellent. In our previous episodes, we established the foundation for self-service private cloud, discussing various topics like infrastructure as code, Kubernetes automation, and the last episode was about database automation. Now today, we'll be exploring extensibility, orchestration, and third-party integration with VCF Automation. So Pramod, let's dive into the topic of the day.
Sure, Satya, let's get started.
Yeah, sure.
So just to set the stage here once again, Arya Automation is the automation solution powering VMware Cloud Foundation, which is VCF. It delivers the self-service automation with governance and resource lifecycle management across the VMware and the public cloud. In this snapshot that you're saying, there are several features that we have already covered, as you have seen in the previous episode. So for this episode, our focus is going to be on to the capabilities such as the extensibility and orchestration. It is a very critical capability because essentially this is where we showcase how we can integrate with the third-party solutions, how you can create those automated workflows to supplement the complex automation use cases that you might have in your organization. All right.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. So this means that VCF automation, whatever we are doing on automation, that can be extended to various tools or services or another software or even public cloud-like environment. And we can bring that all in VCF automation, right? With this.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Satya, because we do understand that many customers have existing investments into different software stack. For example, it could be for the backups, it could be for the disaster recovery and many other solutions. And when it comes to automation, how we can make sure that we integrate those third-party tools and provide end-to-end automation capability.
Excellent.
All right, let's dive into each of these components. So starting out with the Arya Automation Orchestrator. So essentially, it simplifies and automates complex data center infrastructure tasks, as I mentioned earlier. It delivers the consistent remediation of the issues, extensibility, and service delivery, which could be pretty efficient when you're looking at the end-to-end automation. It supports multiple scripting language. As you can see, there are a lot of workflows and a lot of components, elements are there in the screenshot that I have pasted here on this slide. As I mentioned, there are multiple scripting languages, which gives you the flexibility to use existing plugins, which has pre-built workflows, or you can start from the scratch. You can script it right from the beginning, and then you create your workflows, which meets your requirements. So what languages do we support here? As you can see, there's a JavaScript, PowerShell, Node.js, and Python. So these are some of the languages that we support. And some of the important concepts that we need to understand, essentially on this orchestrator side of things, are workflows, the actions, and then the results that you get in form of outputs and things like that. So we will see that shortly into the demo. We will dive deeper into what are these workflows, how they looks like, what are some of the common actions and the results that we are looking at, right?
So the choice of this scripting language you mentioned, so that is available right into the automation. They can choose their own language and then just write on their preferred language. Is that right?
Oh, yes. So from listed languages, they can select what language suits best to their requirements. For example, Python, and they can start writing the code using Python if they wish.
That's really nice. Okay, cool.
Right. Because as you see, those workflows there, these are the set of actions and the scripts and the decisions and the command that run sequentially. So you can build this as your requirements using those multiple languages that we support.
Got it.
All right. Let us quickly check what is ABX. So ABX is basically action-based extensibility, which is part of the Arya automation. And what it does, so you might have this question, what's this ABX?
Yep.
So ABX provides lightweight and flexible runtime engine interface. So it's an engine interface whereby you can define small scriptable actions, configure them to initiate particular events provided by the event broker service, right?
Yeah.
This extensibility supports, again, some languages, as you see. We support Node.js, Python, and PowerShell once again. This is where you can, again, write the scripts, and these scripts can be set to run on AWS, or if you wish to run these scripts on Azure, or even on-premises, which is basically your VCF environment. And then sometimes what happens is you don't need to be so picky. You don't want to pick up your environment where you want to run this, or the fast provider function as a service provider. Essentially, you can set to auto-detect, and then the ABX engine will understand and then run the scripts or the elements as per the configuration.
Right. So I see in the slide, it says function as a service. Is it like similar to things like Lambda and Amazon Web Services? Is it similar kind of functionality?
Yes. So ABX action in Arya automation is something similar to AWS Lambda. Both platforms provide function as a service, fast capabilities, but ABX actions are multi-cloud.
Got it.
Yeah. So you can run ABX actions on your on-premises vSphere environment, on AWS, or on Microsoft Azure as well.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah. So this is a sample code that you see on the screen. So this sample code is based on the Python. It's written in the Python, and then this Python code enables the automation to configure a custom host name. We're going to see this in a demo later on as well.
Cool. Okay, sounds good.
All right, let's move on. Commonly, there would be a question like, where do I access the workflows? How can I access my extensibility? So that's why I have this slide in place. So you define the orchestrator workflows in the ARIA automation orchestrator. You can see that the tile there on the cloud service console. So you open that, there is a library, and from the library, there are a set of workflows, pre-curated workflows, or you can start writing the new workflows if you wish to.
Yes.
And for the ABX action or extensibility, it is part of the assembler. That means you see that assembler tile from the service console. So you access the assembler, and inside the assembler, you have extensibility option, whereby again, you can define the actions, and there's a set of library for you to consume.
I like it the way you actually mentioned it here for AVX access assemblers, and then for VRO workflows for the orchestration job, orchestrator. Yeah, this is nice. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I also thought of putting this one slider here, which will give you some insights into where do you use the workflows and in what circumstances you use the ABX extensibility. So it will give you just information to you to make the right choice, whether you need workflows or whether you need the extensibility actions. So as I mentioned, workflows are best option for on-premises. There are a lot of out-of-the-box plugins to quick start your journey in form of creating new workflows or using the plugins and pre-curated workflows for your requirements. The workflows can be extensive, they can be complex, they could be pretty big workflows, right? Which will be in the demo. You know, in past, we had this, some of the customers who had existing VRO investment, they were the existing VRO customers, but you know, they never used the automation capabilities. So for those customers now, with the ARIA automation, they can use embedded VRO, which is the orchestrator, and consume all the polyglot languages and things like that they want to do.
Nice.
Okay, now on to the extensibility. Obviously, as I mentioned, this is something similar to Lambda function as a service, but this is multi-cloud. It could be used for AWS, Azure, or the public cloud provider. Also for your on-premises vSphere environments. You can start writing small functions, like a small Python script to change the host name or to do something. So this is pretty flexible in terms of how you want to achieve some of those small subsets of your entire automation workflow. As I mentioned, there are multiple languages that we support. So there are customers who have in-house teams and in-house skills around Python or function as a service. Probably it is best suited for them.
Got it. So if I have to ask you, right, give me an example, a customer that is using orchestrator workflow and how a customer is using AVX. Can you give me some examples how our customers are using it?
Right. So workflows can be very extensive and large that I mentioned previously. So I have seen some customer use VRO or ARIA automation orchestrator workflows to create that end-to-end automation, not just provision the applications or provision the compute, storage, and network or load balancers, but also wrap around their requirements about backup. So when they provision the new workloads or virtual machines with the application, they also create new backup policies for that set of new application. They run the first backup. They also provide the disaster recovery capabilities as part of that entire workflow. So I've seen that some of the customers are doing that. In fact, in our lab, what we're doing is with the orchestrator, we're also installing some open source Telegraph agents, which essentially help us to do the monitoring of workloads. So we will see demo. When it comes to extensibility, I have seen some customers, they define small subsets of the scripts to set the host names or rename the default host name to their required application naming conventions. So they write those small Python scripts and then call those scripts using the subscription as part of the compute allocation process. That's how some of the people are consuming these components.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
All right. Okay, so what we're going to do, folks, here, we will walk you through the components here, and then we will dive into the demo so you can able to map what we are talking on the slides, and then you will see that into the live demo.
Sounds
Is that
good.
okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So orchestrator client is a very important component as part of this whole offering. This is where you consume many of the orchestrator features, like you create, run, and debug the workflows from the library. You can create the actions from the library action page. This is where you create those reusable snippets of the code, which can be called from any workflows, right? So these are small subsets of the codes that you define inside your orchestrator. You can monitor the running workflows, meaning what's the status of your workflow activity. So you can monitor that from the activity workflows run page. You can import the packages, which is very important feature as part of the orchestrator client, meaning there are many vendors out there who create this predefined orchestrator packages for VMware Orchestrator. So you
Mhm.
download those packages, you import into the Area Automation Orchestrator page, and
Yep.
then it basically gives you all predefined workflows to consume,
Okay.
right?
So about the orchestrator packages, right? So how large is the ecosystem for that? The orchestrator packages, our third-party vendors, ISVs doing that.
Right. I mean, you can see that from the our marketplace, but again, it's pretty subjective
Yes.
because some of these workflows are not managed and created by us. It is created by those vendors.
Right.
So essentially, we have to look into the compatibility and integrity of those packages and make sure that it is supported before we import into the environment. And once we import into the environment, also you can go through some of those pre-curated workflows and make sure that it's matching all your requirements, matching all your input output capabilities that you want to use. That's really dependent subjective.
So like anything else, we should definitely do this in a test environment and see if it works or not, and then deploy it on production environment, right?
I
Okay,
think
got it.
that's a safe bet to do it. Yeah. Usually you want to test it out in your dev or test environment before you import this or use this in a production. Right.
Cool.
Right.
Yep.
So those are some of the packages that are available. And each package contains a collection of orchestrator workflow. As I mentioned, it's predefined workflow, which has then necessary actions, configuration elements, and the resources from that vendor in order to
Yep.
support all the end-to-end automation within the area orchestrator. All right.
Mhm. Yep.
So let's go ahead quickly and check how this orchestrator looks like into a live demo. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So as you can see, once you log in into the area automation, so I'm
Mhm.
logging into the area automation now based on the role-based access control.
Yep.
And this is this cloud service console, right? This is where you see all the services. Under services, you have assembler, you have orchestrator. So if
Yes.
we open the orchestrator on the new page,
Mhm.
this is how the orchestrator launches. Once
Mhm.
the orchestrator launch, you can see the status quickly, how your workflows are doing. So in my environment, obviously this is a lab environment. So
Yep.
I'm doing a lot of testing and a lot of modifications and trial and error things comes in. So obviously
Mhm.
I'm only 69% successfully running the workflows, but there are some failures as well, right?
Yeah.
You can
Nice.
quickly see add Active Directory server. I
Yeah.
was doing this for another project, which I need to
Yep.
add additional Active Directory into the environment. So that's failing. So I need to troubleshoot that.
Mhm.
There's a restore backup that I'm testing as well. There is generate host name, things like that I'm testing right now. But
Okay.
the gist is that you can quickly see what's going on with your orchestrator. What's the status of orchestrator? What's the status of your workflows? Right
Yes.
now, if I go into the workflows under library, as I mentioned on
Mhm.
the slide, you can toggle this using this button here, which will give you all the different tiles of workloads that are currently
Right.
there, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Or you can use this option to see them in more organized way. So for example, you have a set of library here, which is again available once you deploy the area automation. And some of these are, or many of these are out of the box library items. For
Right.
example, you want to onboard your vCenter for the first time. So
Mhm.
you can go into the configuration and you have some of these pre-curated workflows, like
Okay.
add a vCenter server. So
Yep.
that's the workflow, basically, how the workflow looks like. So
Mm.
obviously there is a schema here, which talks about the workflow name, the ID of the workflow, the version, the tags to organize this workflow based on the tags and many other options. If we dive into the variables, this is where you define the vars or the variables that we talk about, right?
Yep.
So you define the variable based on your requirements. Then there is input output, meaning input are some of these variables that you define, and the workflow takes that input from the user. The
Mm.
output is basically sometimes the workflow use these inputs and provide the output for a next workflow or a subset
Uh,
of workflow, right? So that's your saying. Obviously, there's a schema. This is where you define the scripts. For example, if I click on this script talks about combine host and ports to generate the service list for the vSphere. So if
right.
I go into the scripting part, you can see immediately there is a script available here, right?
Okay.
So this
Mhm.
is how this schema looks like, and schema could have multiple subsets of your workflow. For example,
Mhm.
first is my script, then I'm calling something else, right?
Mm.
So there is the condition that you define. So once you successfully get the information, call for this particular for each thing, which will
Mhm.
again go into the next element. The next element is validate here. So use
Right.
another script to validate whatever this particular element has provided to you, right?
Right.
So that's how it works. It might look a little bit complicated, but yeah. So again, Orchestrator and Extensibility deals a lot with the scripting languages. It deals a lot with the logic that you essentially define to achieve your end-to-end workflows. But the idea is we provide all this library, most of them out of the box, and then you can start creating your own. Okay.
Pretty neat, yeah.
Now, if I go into run this, you can run this and then it will ask all those variables. Adding a vCenter into Orchestrator, then it will ask you the vCenter server instance, fully qualified domain name, or the host name or the IP. You put that, the HTTPS port, or the SDK location, then you define your credentials to connect this vCenter or onboard this vCenter into the Orchestrator. Now,
Yeah.
I will not run that. I have already run this. So if I go into the all runs, I can quickly see the status that I executed this yesterday. It is completed successfully. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if I open this, I can also check the logs right from here, what's going on. So I can check what it does, how it connects, what things it's calling in order to successfully run this workflow. This is all it's doing. Okay. So that is the log. So in case if there are failures, you can quickly check into the logs and find out what's going on, why it failed.
All right.
You
Okay.
can download this and verify as well if you wish to.
Right.
And each of this subset of items or the elements that we call in the schema, it also shows the time it took to complete.
Okay.
Okay. So there are some parameters here. For example, if this stage is successful, you process this. If there is a failure, then stop the workflow. Right?
Yeah.
Condition. If this is successful, then move on to the next subset of that script. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I'll show you the main item that we are talking here. So
Yep.
again, so that's the out of the box library. But then I'm also doing this app monitoring from the orchestrator.
Yeah. Right.
So this is the workflow to do to install the Telegraph agent, and not only just the install, but the configure Telegraph agent based on the application type, whether it is MySQL or Apache. Go ahead and configure that into the area operations. Right, area operation is our monitoring tool, which comes as part of the VMware Cloud Foundation. So the whole idea here is that when I provision the workload, I enable this particular orchestrator workflow as part of the provisioning. So once the provisioning happens at one point, then this workflow gets started. Once this workflow gets started, there are multiple subset of this workflow that you see. For example, first, it is making sure that the VM is powered on, it's fully up and running. And then, what we need to do, we need to check some of the parameters before we start doing the next action. For example, get the refresh token. Once the refresh token is there, check for the VROps, check for that particular VM resource. If the VM resource is not available, wait for the counter. So then the script is in such a way that then the counter gets incremented, and then it continue to wait until the resource is available. Once the resource is available, it also check the status of that resource. So when I say resource, that means the VM or the machine, right? That is being provisioned. Now, once the VM resource is found onto the vCenter, and then it is powered on, what this particular workflow will do, it will go ahead and install the Telegraph agent. So for example, here. So go ahead and try to install the Telegraph agent. There are certain inputs that we need to provide, right? And then it will go ahead and try to install the Telegraph agent. Now, once the Telegraph agent is installed, it checks whether it is successfully up and running, right? And then it moves on to the next stage to do the remaining part of the configuration, like waiting for the Telegraph agent to be up and running. The VM can show into the area operation as the Telegraph agent is fully loaded. And then as the next step, what it does, it will go ahead and checking for what kind of application running on this host. Is it sort of meaning I have given the conditions into the provisioning that this is MySQL application or this is Apache application based on those preconditions from the area automation cloud template. Then it will pick that information and then start configuring the configuration that it requires. For example, if it is a MySQL based application, it will SQL configuration. See, it install the SQL plugin like that. So there is a basic code running here to configure the SQL. If it verifies that it is not SQL but the Apache, then it will go ahead and run this subset of the code to set the Apache. So you can see there is the username, there's a URL, it will do the configuration as per the plugin. Is it making sense now to you, Satya?
Yeah, it's making sense. It's a really long, complex workflow, and there are lots of checks there. And then if this is making right, if this happens, do this, this happen, do this. Yeah, it's a complex one.
Right. So now, where do we call this? So I can quickly go into the automation and show you the blueprint, which is also called a cloud template.
Right. Okay.
So in the blueprint here, imagine I have this template here, right?
Yep.
Now, if I open this template, which is again a little bit complex template, which deploys the application, web application with MySQL database and advanced load balancer. We have seen this in our previous episode when we showed the advanced load balancer automation. So correct. So now if I click on the front end, you can see here, here, the agent, right? So
Mhm.
there is a property that I defined called agent. It is
Yep.
looking for input.os monitoring. If it is true,
Yep.
trigger the agent telegraph installation workflow, which we just saw in the orchestrator.
Right. Okay.
Right? Now, where is this input coming from? Input is coming from the input property at the top, where I define and ask customer or my user to specify whether he needs OS monitoring, which is here. This is the input property.
Yes.
So, for example, if I'm the user, I'm trying to provision this. At
Yes.
some point, I see whether I need OS and application monitoring.
Yep.
Right? So once I click this, the whole workflow will start kicking in at one point because
Right.
that's defined into the whole action here. So subscription,
Right.
you see here.
Mm.
That's
Yes.
so always remember you could work in conjunction with orchestrated workflows as well as the extensibility. All right.
Mm. Mm.
So you can mix and match and use both of the, you can use best of both the worlds. For
Mm.
example, now I have the orchestrated workflow. I'm also
Mm.
calling that workflow as part of the extensibility action. So this is the workflow that we just saw into the orchestrator,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm calling this workflow as part of the event topic. We will cover that shortly as part of the ABX. But then
Mhm.
the end action item here is to execute install telegraph agent VM workflow, what we saw.
Yes.
So at one
Yes.
point, when the provisioning is happening using that cloud template, and once the user select that I need OS monitoring, at
Mhm.
one point, as per this compute post provisioning event,
Mm.
then the workflow will get triggered and user will get the OS monitoring in their operations.
Okay.
Okay.
So now the execution of this blueprint, right? When that template or the blueprint is executed,
Mhm.
it showed us in the script that if that OS monitoring is enabled, the Boolean
Mhm.
value,
Yeah.
if that's true, then it will go and invoke the workflow. That's what
Right.
you, right?
Remember in the blueprint I showed you, there is
Yes.
the property that I had set agent
Yeah.
telegraph.
Yeah.
So based on that Boolean, if a user select I need OS monitoring, at one point, because there is this compute post provisioning event comes in the
Yes.
post provisioning event, then the array automation look for these properties defined into the blueprint, and if
Yes.
property match, it will straight away trigger this workflow.
Okay. So now the workflow is executed from this extensibility. Is that where it is executed from?
Extensibility, you're only using the subscription, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
subscription is a way of invoking the workflows, but then
Mm.
workflows, actual workflow is setting into your orchestrator.
Okay. And this is the workflow that the
Correct.
extensibility subscription executes.
Correct.
Okay. Got
Install
it.
Telegraph agent on VM. See
Got
here,
it. Mm, mm,
install
mm. Okay.
Telegraph agent on the VM. It's the same here. Install Telegraph agent on the VM. That's the
So
workflow.
that's the workflow it calls. Got it now. Okay. Cool.
Okay. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's how pretty much the orchestrator works. And again, there are a lot of things into the orchestrator. Obviously, you can do few things around backup, adding new backup. So there could be some workflow sitting there. Day two backup actions like getting the machine ID, adding
Mhm.
tags to the VM and things like that. Same thing with firewall as a service. You can
Mm.
use those distributed firewalls, dynamic types, gateway firewall, dynamic types. So a lot of things that you can do with the orchestrator. Um,
Right.
just thing to note is that many of the library items are out of the box that you get. So
Mm.
library item you get out of the box. For example, you want to get the Active Directory, you see
Mhm.
that coming out of the box. But then some of these workflows that we are developing, these are the custom work. So this is a customization that we are doing.
All right.
This is
Okay.
also custom work that I spoke about, the
Mhm.
Telegraph agent installation. Yeah. So again, there's a flexibility. You use the pre-curated workflows based on the vendor plugins, or you create your own workflows.
Okay. Yeah. It looks very extensible. Nice. Yeah.
Okay, coming back.
Mhm.
So let's move on to the extensibility now. I just give you a sneak peek into how the extensibility looks like
Yeah.
when we were showing the demo. But yeah, let's go a little bit deeper into the extensibility. So as you
Mhm.
see, I mentioned previously, we can support multiple language as part of the extensibility as well. Some of those we also called as polyglot capabilities. So when
Mm.
it comes to polyglot capabilities, we support Node.js, PowerShell, Python, right?
Mm. Mm.
We will see this into the demo.
Yep.
And then obviously there is this extensibility options around ABX flows, ABX REST calls, which is REST API calls, and the ABX scripts, right?
Mhm.
So
Mm.
what is the script option that you're seeing on the screen? So
Yep.
basically the script option creates the ABX action that's called your whatever code that you have written. This code could be written in form of Node.js, PowerShell, Python, right? So that's
Mhm.
the script option. There is this REST request as well, as you can see, and the REST poll. So REST action and REST request and the REST poll. It is basically to invoke the REST APIs operations. Either you want to run it periodically, or you want to run this at a particular point of the automation, you could trigger those based on your REST API requirements, right? And the other option that you see on the screen is the flow. So the flow is basically, it's your workflow. So we just now saw a workflow. So Extensibility also has an option of workflows whereby you can stitch together multiple ABX action, and then those action can run in sequence as per your definition of the workflow. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Just bear with me because orchestration and extensibility can be a bit complicated topic because this is where the programming language concept comes in, the logic and condition comes in, as I mentioned previously. So let's go through this. Now, subscription, we have just now seen the subscription. So subscription is where basically you provide the description, the names of your subscription as per your requirements. And then there are event topics. So you saw the event topics as the compute allocation. So there are multiple topics that we will see later in the demo shortly. So based on what you're trying to achieve as part of your end-to-end automation, you select the event topic. And then, based on that event topic, then you define the condition as well. Remember, I just showed you the condition we had in our subscription that talked about look for agent if it is equal to telegraph in the blueprint, then trigger that condition for a specific blueprint or specific properties that we define. So we will see that in demo. And then obviously once the condition is made, you trigger the necessary workflow. So the workflow could be installing the telegraph agent, what we saw just now, or it could be something else, right? As per your requirement, like creating Active Directory user and adding the VM compute name into your DNS or domain controller. All that can be achieved using this extensibility and the workflows. You see one important thing there, the blocking toggle there. Can you see on the screen the blocking toggle? This is where you define how your workflows or the ABX action needs to be executed. So blocking means synchronously, non-blocking means asynchronously, right? So based on your requirement, if you're running multiple actions, multiple workflows, you define what's your strategy around executing those actions and workflows. All right. So before going into the integration part now, let me quickly walk you through on a demo of extensibility. I'll show you one extensibility subscription that I have created. We have seen this, but let's see a simple basic subset, because remember, ABX could be very small scripts or small subset that you want to invoke as part of your big strategized end-to-end automation workflow. So let's do this small one. And you see here, this is what is it basically doing is it's trying to rename the virtual machine. So I'm trying to define the name for my virtual machine when it gets provisioned, right? And again, there's an event topic, as I mentioned just now on the slide. So event topic I'm selecting is the compute allocation. I will shortly show what are the options available there. So now this is event topic that I need as part of the provisioning of my blueprint. And then I have defined a different condition here. Now you can see I'm looking for specific blueprint ID for invoking this particular extensibility action, ABX action. So I'm mapping this action, rename VM action, only for 2 of my blueprints. I'm not using this workflow for all my blueprints. I could have hundreds of blueprints of the template, but out of those, only these are the 2 templates which I need this particular action to be invoked when someone provision and use that template. Making sense?
Yeah, it does.
Right. Now, what is this action that I'm trying to do? So if I go into rename VM action, it brings me into that action tab and I can open this. And there you go. So you can see, remember I was talking about those scripts, flows, and REST request and REST all options. So right now I'm using script here. We can support Python, PowerShell, Node.js, different version of Node.js and PowerShell as well. Right. So now this script is in Python. So the initial part of it is just the context, what we're trying to do, right? So basically what we're trying to do is the input will have the resource name, which could be old name, and then there will be a new name. So the new name is defined as here. And then once we use that, we want to bring in the output capabilities around the new names and the old names. And then the new name will come in order to make those appropriate changes to change the VM name to my desired name, right? So basic Python code here, right? And the other important thing that I was talking about earlier, you can see the fast provider. These are some options that you have. For example, I'm running this for my on-premises private cloud based on the VMware Cloud Foundation. So I'm using this on-premises, but you could select this if you're running this function as a service to AWS or Azure as well, if you're configuring those, right?
So only 3 clouds at the moment? Only three endpoints?
Oh, yes. For now, yes. That's what we do.
Right. Okay.
Right. So on-premises are now, obviously I can test this out, but let's see this in actual action, right? So this is the subscription, right? The subscription is rename VM. Now, if I show you one of the templates, that is invoking the subscription is the rename VM ABX action. So if I open this, very simple template, just a VM and network, I would bring your attention to this machine name. So I'm asking my user to define the machine name that they desire, right? So it's input condition, right? Name for the VM. And then I'm calling that particular name as a new name here in the resource properties.
That's a variable,
Input.machine name. So now we have seen all the things that are being built inside this particular template. So let's go ahead and deploy this. So for deployment, I can call it episode 5, right? Copy this name. And by the way, this is a deployment name, so let's not confuse. The VM name could be different altogether, right? And you can obviously select all the things here, what we have seen in the previous episodes. So folks, if you are new to this, please watch our previous episodes so that you can get the gist of this. I can select the cost center, which is my user. And remember this option here, enable OS application monitoring. That's the orchestrated workflow that we showed in the demo earlier as part of the orchestrator, right?
Yes.
I'm not doing this, but let's focus on the ABX. So I quickly give a name. I give the same name as my deployment for the VM. If I go ahead and deploy this, let's check what's going on, right? So obviously we have seen this in our previous episodes as well, how the ARIA automation does the provisioning. It's going to check for necessary resources. Once the resources are there, it will check for the approvals, if there are any approval policies in place. And then from there, it will do the provisioning.
Okay.
So just to save the time, while this is going on, as you see, there is no approval and it's provisioning the workload now. I'll show you one previous deployment. So rename VM ABX. That's the deployment we did yesterday. I provided name as rename underscore VM hyphen ABX. That's the name I provided as part of a provisioning. If I go into my vCenter, obviously we will see that VM here. Okay. So that's the VM name that I was talking. You see the DNS name here also gets defined based on that ABX action that we just spoke. Right. All right. So now we have successfully done the second demo use case of ABX. Let's move on to the next topic quickly, which is the integration. So as you can see, Satya, there are a lot of integration points that are available out of the box with ARIA automation. Most of this we can do it. We have this available in the lab, but I'm going to bring your attention to AWS, right? So we have this AWS public cloud integration. So let's go ahead and quickly see this in a demo, like how do all these integrations like AWS or your Ansible or your Terraform or GitLab. So let's quickly check those into the integration. So same things again. I go into the assembler, and inside the assembler, you see this infrastructure. Infrastructure is where you do all the integrations basically. So for example, I currently have Ansible server, I have my ARIA operations, Terraform, Active Directory, also GitLab, but then there are other integration points that you can see here. So Bitbucket or GitHub or IPAM like Infoblox, Puppet, and OpenShift. You can do all this. But let's go and see the one that I was talking about, AWS. So I have AWS cloud account added here, right? And so you can add multiple cloud providers as part of the cloud account. So I have added AWS. If you want, you can add Azure or GCP as well. So I have my cloud account here, AWS. Essentially what it needs the access key and secret access key, okay? As long as you have this from your IAM roles that are available in the AWS console for a given user, you get these keys, you put it here, you validate. Once you validate this, obviously you can see all the necessary availability zones that you want to consume. So in my case, I'm using AP Southeast 1, which is the Singapore availability zone, right? And I have given the tags for this. So how can we then use this particular account, right? Now, if I show you a blueprint, let's see how the blueprint looks like. So this Pramod AWS web server, simple blueprint, and I'm using the concept of cloud agnostic nature of the elements. So you cloud agnostic. This means these particular objects can be used for your AWS or for your Azure or for your GCP or for your on-premises deployment as well.
Okay.
That means you don't need to sprawl multiple cloud template, one for AWS, one for Azure, one for GCP, one for on-premises. Rather, you use the cloud agnostic nature, right? So in this case, what I'm doing is simply deploying an EC2 instance, right? And there are multiple input parameters that I have defined, so we don't need to really look into this. But the main gist of this is this VM will get provision, and this will provision an EC2 instance, and it will also use the AWS existing network. Now, how we use this basically again from this particular cloud template is basically we do some onboarding here. For example, if I go into the flavor mapping under the all. See, within the same agnostic flavor, I can add on-premises template, or I can also add my AWS sizing. So for on-premises, we define in terms of the number of CPUs in the memory. For AWS, we define based on their own sizing parameters. For example, T2 micro, right?
Yeah.
And then similar thing we do for image mapping as well. So if I bring your attention here on an image mapping, so on image mapping as well, it's an agnostic nature. For my on-premises Ubuntu 2004, I have a template created in the vSphere. But for my AWS, I have the AMI image, Amazon Machine Image that they support, right? So AMI is defined here. Okay. So let's go ahead and provision this quickly and see what happens, right? So I can provision this from my self-service portal, which is Service Broker. Go into the Service Broker and I will look for the AWS EC2 instance here. Quickly say request. I will give name as episode 5 AWS, right? I also give the same name for my VM. And then I say, where do I want to deploy this, right? I can deploy this same thing on my on-premises vSphere Cloud Foundation, which will be a virtual machine form factor. But if I select AWS Cloud, it will be EC2 instance. Okay.
All right.
So I select.
So look, get environment value. It deploys at the right infrastructure, right?
Yes. So I can submit. I have a capability to check what's going on with this provisioning.
Yep.
So same thing once again, what we see in earlier, I can check the status of this provisioning, but make a point here is that this provisioning is not going to happen into your vCenter within your VMware Cloud Foundation, but this provisioning basically going to happen into the AWS Cloud account.
Yeah. Is it possible to see what's going on AWS?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's my AWS console logged in with my account.
And you've chosen Singapore region?
Yes. And let's see. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
The name also came in because remember, we have the rename virtual machine ABX action. So
yes.
Also define the episode 5 name.
By AWS. Yes, that's the name we gave there. Okay, cool.
Instance is running now.
Nice. And the instance type is T2 micro, which you defined there, right? Yeah, awesome. Very nice.
It is working. It will come up and soon you can consume this.
Excellent, man.
So that's how we do the public cloud integration. And as you can also see here, it's successful.
Very successful. Awesome.
That's the name, episode 5 that we define. You can connect to the console and then do the SSH keys and access your instance. Okay.
Got it. Awesome. Very nice.
So that's the public cloud integration that I spoke about. Let's quickly go and talk about the next integration, right?
What is that one?
Okay. So the next integration that we're going to talk about is the Git operation, right?
Yeah.
The Git operation. So once again, you can integrate your preferred Git source control tool. Could be it is GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub, right? Depending on what you're using for your source control. In our demo, we're going to use the GitLab. So essentially what happens is there is out-of-box integration point available for this Git operation tools. You onboard them, you define your projects, you define your repositories, and then you're good to go ahead and consume this, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So let's go quickly and check once again here. So if I go into the assembler, inside the infrastructure.
Yes.
Inside the infrastructure, under the integration option here, we have the GitLab, right? So I can open this GitLab. You can see it needs the tokens. Obviously, you need a token from your GitLab console. So you get a token, you put it here, validate with the host name or the IP address of your GitLab server. And then once this is authenticated, you add your project, what project that you want to consume. So this project is your VRA project. So in VRA, you can have multiple projects, what we have seen in previous episodes, right?
Yes.
So over here, I have this Moad project. And for Moad project, I'm having multiple repositories coming from the GitLab, for example, the Arya Auto or the Cloud template, right? So one type is the template, the other type is the configuration. So for Terraform, I'm using Terraform configuration repository. For the template, I'm using Cloud template. Now, if I quickly go into the GitLab, this is the on-premises GitLab server that I have. So you saw this Cloud templates as well as you have your Arya Auto library. So it's if I go into the Cloud template, now currently this is the blueprint YAML, right? This is for my Argo CD deployment, Argo CD pipeline for MySQL application deployment. How this Git operation works, basically, imagine this is your line of code. You're going to make changes using some IDE or, the visual code, and then you're going to git push and git commit, right? So instead of that, what I'm doing is I'm directly into the GitLab. This is my file. I'm going to quickly edit this. You can use git push, git commit as well using the IDE if you're comfortable with that. But to make it simple, I make a modification of this code and change the version of my file to 5, this code. Okay. I made the change. I say commit changes.
Yep.
I committed my changes in the GitLab. If I go back to the assembler, so this is the one that is coming from the GitLab, which is called Argo CD. We have just modified this. If I sync repo,
Yep.
and give it probably a few seconds, we should able to see this version gets changed to 5. Right? Currently, earlier it was 4, but we changed this to 5, and we committed the change. So soon
Yes.
we will able to see it here. Also in the versions, we will see. Yeah, there you go. So fifth
Five. Yep.
here, and then within the code line of code also you can see now there's a version 5. Right?
5. Yep. Cool. Oh, nice integration. Yeah.
So that's a GitLab or Git operation that we support using the Argo automation. So let's go back to the next integration that we want to talk. Terraform. Yep. Once again, Terraform integration is based on those the Terraform capabilities that we offer today from the Argo automation. So we have different Terraform versions that are being positioned as part of the Argo automation, including the latest version. And then what you do is you enable the Terraform configuration, and then once you enable the Terraform configuration and the integration within the automation, you will start consuming the Terraform codes, which is based on the providers and the resources that are available on the Terraform side, right?
Yeah.
So let's quickly check that as well in the demo. So basically, if you go into the infrastructure once again under integration, you have this Terraform. So basically, what you do is for the Terraform runtime, obviously you need a runtime integration as well. So what options we have currently, we can use a managed Kubernetes cluster or the external kube config file of any cluster that you want to consume as part of the runtime integration. So there's a dependency that you need a Terraform runtime integration with the runtime type. So in this case, it's a Kubernetes, right? So I'm using my on-premises Tanzu Kubernetes grid cluster and the default namespace, right? Once you have this, obviously, you could validate the configuration. As long as you have a valid Kubernetes cluster, the credentials will get validated. And of course, you can save this. Now, once this integration is onboarded, what you can see is here Terraform versions. So this is what we support. There are latest Terraform versions available, right? Which we can use. And these Terraform versions are also called into the project. So if I go into the project, for example, Moad, and if I go into the provisioning, so under provisioning, I have enabled the Terraform Cloud Zone mapping on this project. Once you're all done, obviously, beside the Terraform integration, you will also need a Git operation tool for this integration to work. So not only just Terraform integration, but you will also need some sort of a Git operation tool. So in this case, we have GitLab. Now, from a GitLab, I earlier showed you, I have this repository, repository with the Terraform configuration. So you have to also have that repository available into your GitLab. So if I go back to the GitLab here, you can see that's the GitLab repository, and I have my main and variable Terraform files, the configuration files that actually does the magic, right? Now, once you have this integration in place, how can you consume this? So if you go into the blueprints and you see here Terraform option, so you can create the new blueprints or template using the Terraform. So for example, here, episode 5, Terraform, select the project like Moad. This is where I have enabled the repository. And then I can see this is my GitLab Arya auto repository. Remember the main file and the variable file was there. So I select that. There's a commit ID from the GitLab. I select the source directory. And then if I say next, this is where the variable file comes in. This is where the Terraform configuration comes in. So basically, this particular Terraform configuration is provisioning a virtual machine into my vSphere cluster. It could be any. You could be using Terraform providers for any other applications or infrastructure provider. So as long as those configuration files, the main files and the variable files are there into your Git library, we will able to use this based on the integration.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense?
Yeah, makes sense. So that means if the customer already has pre-existing Terraform templates and they want to integrate that with VCF automation, just follow the similar sort of way of doing it, right? So they can continue their Terraform investment. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So there are some other capabilities around this provisioning, because not to forget, Arya Automation provides you the governance and control capability, whereby you enforce the governance by adding more approval policies, the quota policies, and whatnot. So all that Arya Automation richness around governance and control also kicks in for your Terraform provisionings as well.
Exactly. That's what VCF automation is known for, right? Governance and control. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Now I think we are at the last thing of our session, which is basically the ServiceNow integration. As you know, many customers, sometimes they have the existing investment into the ServiceNow, whereby they use ServiceNow for their ITSM or that one console from where they request the resources, they request the services in their organization. Now, what will happen if a customer already using ServiceNow for their front end tool? It is like their front end requesting tool. Can they still consume the area automation? So in this case, the area automation will sit behind the ServiceNow, and then whatever projects, the catalog items that we have in area automation can be consumed from the ServiceNow.
Okay.
Right. So all the action happens in ServiceNow, like creating the request IDs, multi-level approvals within the ServiceNow, ticketing system, all the workflow processing happen in the ServiceNow as a front-end tool. But under the hood backend, it will trigger the area automation workflows and area automation's catalog items and the blueprints.
Nice. Okay. Let's have a look.
Yeah. So let's quickly do that. Okay. This is the ServiceNow portal. So this is the front-end portal whereby you can request the services from the ServiceNow. So let's click on request something.
Yeah, right.
From request something, on the category types, you can see all the area automation items are there. That means all my projects, all my catalogs are already imported into the ServiceNow. And how this is happening based on the ServiceNow plugin for area automation that we have. So once you configure the mid server for on-premises area automation, based on the mid server configuration and integration with ServiceNow, all these catalogs will be imported into the ServiceNow. And let's go ahead and open one of the project, like demo project, and I can see all these catalogs are there. Essentially, I'm gonna open one of the templates or a catalog that we call. So that's actually demo. I think that's demo hyphen test. So yeah, let's make the change. Demo hyphen one. So this is the catalog. I open that. It takes a few seconds here because it's a lab environment. And you can see quickly, this is just any other form that we have seen into the area automation, right?
Yes.
So I'm selecting my project, and this is going to deploy a Azure instance, Azure VM. ServiceNow in the backend area automation. So quickly go ahead and request that. Now, once I submit the request in ServiceNow, obviously it will give me a request ID. Right? So you can see there's a request ID, and there is then ServiceNow workflow comes in, whether there is the approval process and whatnot. Right. And if I bring your attention to my area automation, in the area automation, the Azure demo deployment is going on as well. Right?
Yes.
So ServiceNow triggered this catalog, and this catalog now provisioning instance into the Azure. So this is day one provisioning, right? What happened to the day two provisioning? So obviously there is this deployment visit. So in the deployment visit from the ServiceNow, I can view all my deployments, and imagine this is my existing deployment. I can go ahead there and I can make the changes into that deployment. So click on that deployment really quick. The day two, I can make changes on the virtual machine, or I can change on the deployment as well. So let's go ahead and power off the virtual machine as a day two action.
Yes.
Once again, we submit the request like order now from a ServiceNow, and it will give me the request ID for the day two actions as well.
Right.
So now we can see quickly that's the day two action that we triggered, and into the area automation as well. Now the power off instance is also going on, right? So that's day two action what we have seen. So this is what I wanted to show you in terms of how we integrate ServiceNow with area automation. So now ServiceNow become my front-end portal, which does all the requesting the resources, activities, day two actions, and things like that. But in the back end, those necessary catalogs in the projects are get triggered within the area automation, right? We have seen provisioning a new Azure instance from the ServiceNow, but it called my catalog to provision the VRA workflow. And then for day two action as well, it did the same thing. When I powered off the existing instance, it also triggered the action from my area automation. That's pretty much Satya we have for today. So we covered a lot. We covered the orchestration part. We covered action-based extensibility part from the area automation. We also saw various type of integrations like AWS instance provisioning from the VRA. We also saw the GitLab integration. We also saw Terraform integration, and now we finally gone through the ServiceNow integration with area automation.
Pretty good, man. Lots of things there. Yeah. It's a great demonstration otherwise, man. Really appreciate that.
Sure.
In our next episode, we'll be exploring workload day two patching.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Workload day two patching. Okay, that's the plan for the next episode. And thanks everyone for sticking until the end. And we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. And until then, take care and bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.